Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome, if you're new. This is The Secrets of Lincoln's Tomb, a memorial for the ages. Oh, my nose. Before we get started, thumbs up, subscribe, helps me out. This is grave explorations. I've never done this. And if you want to donate to the channel, coffin photo. Yeah, that one's real. If you want to donate to the channel, there's a thanks button. Click on that, donate, request a video. Your name sponsors that video. All right, let's get into it.
Walking along the side paths of Oak Ridge Cemetery, grave explorers will encounter the burial places of people who played a part in Lincoln's story. And in Block 14 rests a man who not only played a part in it, but also gave us a greater understanding of his roots. William Herndon was a Springfield attorney who has the distinction of being Abraham Lincoln's last law partner. Soon after the president's death, Herndon began an extraordinary journey, crisscrossing Sangamon County and beyond, seeking out anyone who knew him in his younger days. He recorded their memories, and the following year he began a series of lectures based on his research. His presentations were a hit with the public. However, they were neither welcomed nor endorsed by Lincoln's family. It was no secret that Mary and Herndon had mutual contempt for one another. In private, he referred to Mary as that she-wolf or wildcat, and to her he was a filthy dog. Among the details that the family objected to were the claims of domestic discord in the Lincoln home. Herndon suggested that Abe was an atheist, and also raised questions about the legitimacy of his mother. But what nettled Mary most of all was the girl her husband's old partner made famous more than 30 years after her death. Anne Rutledge was one of 10 children of James Rutledge, who owned a tavern in the town of New Salem, where Abraham Lincoln settled at the age of 22. According to Herndon, Anne and the future president became romantically involved, and that she was his only true love. He added that Anne's death in 1835 was the cause of Lincoln's lifelong bouts of melancholy.
Why should the spirit of mortal be proud?
Mary was humiliated by the suggestion, feeling that it galvanized her unpopularity and perpetuated the widely accepted belief that she only brought misery to her husband.
I'm reading Abraham Lincoln, A Life, Volume 1, and they say the exact same thing, that he wasn't super religious, which is fine, that he was in love with Anne Rutledge, and when he was going to marry her, the name's gone. I forget things a lot more now. He was going to marry her. He backed out. And the thought was because she wasn't Anne Rutledge. And he did question his mother, Nancy Hanks. And I'm wondering if it was because his stepmother was so good to him. She encouraged him to read and do a bunch of things like that. And I think that his mother, when he looks back on her, his mother came from a family of slaveholders, and so I think he kind of views negatively, but he shouldn't.
But Herndon believed he was redeeming Mary's character through the Rutledge story. In a letter to one of his critics, he wrote,
"She hates me, on the same grounds that a thief hates a policeman who knows a dangerous secret about him. All of Lincoln's struggles, difficulties, etc., between himself and his wife were caused by his admission that he did not love her and instead loved another. The world does not know Mrs. Lincoln. Her sufferings, her domestic quarrels, in my opinion, sprang from a woman's revenge which she was not strong enough to resist. Through me, the world will know and sympathize with her."
The supposed romance between Lincoln and Rutledge captured the public's imagination and was advanced by biographers including Albert Beveridge and Carl Sandburg. Filmmakers like D.W. Griffith and John Ford continued the narrative in cinema into the 1940s. However, many of William Herndon's so-called witnesses could not agree if Abe and Anne were lovers or just friends, and given the fact that during the time of their supposed courtship she was engaged to another man, and that none of Lincoln's surviving letters make any mention of her, has caused modern historians to underplay the relationship or to deny it altogether. His dispute with Mary notwithstanding, Herndon might have shown deference to the First Lady by waiting until after she died before publishing his 3-volume biography of Lincoln. Although the validity of his work is in doubt, it remains a valuable source of first-hand information about Lincoln's early life, and it represents the 16th president not as a demigod, but as a man who wrestled with doubt and indecision, and in spite of his fallibilities managed to rise to greatness. Further along in Block 10 is the Edwards family plot, prominently marked with an obelisk belonging to Ninian Edwards, who governed Illinois from territory to statehood. Close by is his son Ninian Wirt and his wife Elizabeth Todd, Mary Lincoln's eldest sister. The Edwards Springfield home was a frequent setting for some of the most important events of Lincoln's early life. It was where his unlikely courtship to Mary began. Mary's sister and brother-in-law were not keen on the match, feeling that Lincoln was too coarse in manner for the well-bred girl from Kentucky. But Mary fell in love with the gangly, unkempt frontier lawyer, and it was in the Edwards front parlor that they were married in 1842. More than a century later, the close ties between the families would lead to a surprising discovery within the Edwards plot in Oak Ridge Cemetery. In the autumn of 1954, descendants of the Edwards family decided to replace the weathered and cracked marble stepping stone at the entrance of the family burying ground. As the workmen lifted the old stone out of the ground, they noticed writing on the underside. Cleaning off the mud, they read the name Lincoln, and in that instant they knew they had found something special. It turned out to be the headstone of Abraham and Mary Lincoln's son Eddie, who died at the age of 3. Realizing the significance, the cemetery alerted the Edwards family and local historians. The discovery was national news that recalled a forgotten member of the Lincoln family. Edward Baker Lincoln was born in Springfield on March 10, 1846. When his father was elected to Congress, he moved to Washington, D.C. with the family, but the swampy miasma of the capital city did not agree with Mary and the boys, and it was decided that she would return to Springfield. Back at home, Eddie seemed more prone to illness, and in early December 1849 he came down with a serious cough and fever. As the days wore on, his health steadily worsened. He struggled for breath as his lungs filled with fluid. Eventually he became so weak that he couldn't raise his head from the pillow. He fought bravely for 52 days until early in the morning of February 1st, 1850, when his long suffering finally ended. Lincoln mentioned the tragedy in a letter to his stepbrother, stating succinctly that his second son had died and that he and Mary missed him very much. The letter greatly understated what was a devastating blow to the Lincoln family. Mary confined herself to her room for weeks, refusing to eat. Her husband pleaded with her. "We must eat, Mary," he said, "for we must live." Eventually, the couple weathered the storm and managed to cope with their loss. 10 months later, they welcomed their third child, a boy they called Willie, and he was followed in 1853 by a fourth boy named Thomas. On a cold, gray February afternoon, Eddie Lincoln was laid to rest in Hutchison Cemetery, which was located in the outskirts of town on what is now the site of Springfield High School. 15 years later, he was brought to Oak Ridge and his coffin placed in the temporary Lincoln tomb beside his father and the brother born after him. Rather than discard the old headstone, Mary gave it to Sister Elizabeth, who had the name Edwards carved into the back before placing it in the family plot where it remained for 89 years. The epitaph at the bottom reads, "Of such is the kingdom of heaven." The phrase taken from the Bible was commonly used on children's headstones in the 19th century. Curiously, historians found the same verse within an anonymously written poem entitled Little Eddie that was published in the Illinois Daily Journal 6 days after Eddie Lincoln died. It was well known that Lincoln was an amateur poet, and the line in the poem together with the epitaph on the headstone caused some to speculate that he was the author of the verse. Others felt that Little Eddie was written by a mother and therefore was penned by Mary. However, both theories are incorrect. Stylistically, the poem does not match the structure, rhythm, or meter used by Lincoln, and it is doubtful that Mary was the author, as she was far too overcome with grief to be able to compose herself, let alone a verse. Although the true author of Little Eddie remains clouded in mystery, the poem is a reminder of a lost little boy who departed this world too soon, but left an indelible mark on the lives he touched.
Little Eddie. Those midnight stars are sadly dimmed, that late so brilliantly shone, and the crimson tinge from cheek and lip, with the heart's warm life has flown. The angel death was hovering nigh, and the lovely boy was called to die. The silken waves of his glossy hair lie still over his marble brow, and the pallid lip and pearly cheek the presence of death avow. Pure little bud in kindness given, in mercy taken to bloom in heaven. Happier far is the angel child with the harp and crown of gold, who warbles now at the Savior's feet the glories to us untold. Eddie, meet blossom of heavenly love, dwells in the spirit world above. Angel boy, fare thee well, farewell, sweet Eddie, we bid thee adieu. Affection's wail cannot reach thee now, deep though it be and true. Bright in the home to him now given, for of such is the kingdom of heaven.
Eddie now rests in the Lincoln tomb with his family at Oak Ridge Cemetery. His original headstone is on public display at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library in Springfield, Illinois. The children of Springfield told stories about the mad woman living in the big house on 2nd Street near the new state capitol. They whispered about how she never left her rooms where the curtains were always drawn to keep out the light. It was said that she spent her days poring over musty clothes that were kept in large trunks, often raging that something had gone missing or was stolen. Those daring enough to conceal themselves below her window told of woeful cries emanating from within. Everyone knew that she'd been locked away in a madhouse and would be there still if she was anyone else. They wondered how it could be that this sad, wretched woman had been the wife of the great Abraham Lincoln. The ridicule of the neighborhood children was no different than any that Mary Todd Lincoln had endured for most of her adult life. When she was the First Lady, there were rumors in Washington that she was a Confederate sympathizer because she had family members fighting for the South. Her White House spending accounts were scrutinized. The lavish receptions and parties she was famous for were called disgraceful, considering that at the same time soldiers in the field were going hungry. And her habit of accepting gifts in exchange for patronage jobs raised eyebrows, with some in Congress calling for criminal investigations. But nothing was said about her visits to military hospitals where she gave comfort to the wounded and dying. She sat with them listening to their complaints and wrote letters home to their families. There was a side to Mary that her critics didn't see or didn't care to. They preferred to satirize the uncultured Westerner rather than remark about her intelligence, wit, and charm. In her youth, she was considered a great beauty and had been courted by the best in Illinois society, including Lincoln's political adversary, Stephen A. Douglas. Mary's personality was always mercurial, or as her cousin put it, as prone to sudden change as an April day. Her outbursts were almost always preceded by crippling migraines. She harbored irrational fears of poverty, abandonment, and loss that came to terrible reality with the deaths of 2 children, followed by her husband, whom she said was her all. Mr. Lincoln could always weather the worst of Mary's black moods and somehow managed to bring her back to reason. Once, after a particularly brutal tongue lashing, a friend asked him why he put up with her ill temper. Abe replied, "If you knew how little harm it does me and how much good it does her, you wouldn't wonder why I tolerate it." But with him gone, she sank into an ocean of despair. Those closest to her said that when he was struck down, she died with him. Even tragedy didn't stand in the way of public condemnation. When she complained that the monthly allowance she received from her husband's estate barely provided a living, she was criticized for being ignorant of the fact that her monthly allowance exceeded what most Americans earned in a year. Meanwhile, old debts fell into arrears and creditors threatened to go public if she didn't pay. It forced Mary to sell her old clothing, but the sale only brought out the curious who came to look and not to buy. It was another instance where she was scoured by the press. After being awarded a small annual pension, she left for Europe with Tad to escape her enemies. Then, within a few short years, Tad was taken by death. It was the blow that caused her final break with reality. She always believed that her suffering was divine punishment for ambition. Now there was no question of it in her mind. Mary had long claimed to see ghosts, which led her to spiritualism. She consulted with mediums and attended seances, hoping to find absolution in the world beyond. She had her portrait taken by spirit photographer William Mumler, whose work by that time was exposed as fraudulent by showman P.T. Barnum. Finally, her erratic behavior became more than Robert could bear. Worried that she was squandering his father's estate on charlatans, he had her committed to a mental institution. After 4 months, she was released into her sister's custody. The following year, she was declared competent and resumed control of her own affairs. Now estranged from her only surviving child, Mary traveled to Europe alone, where she would remain for the next 4 years. In declining health, she returned to Springfield and rented rooms in her sister's home. It was there on July 15, 1882, that Mary suffered a stroke and lapsed into a coma. When she died the next day at age 63, her family said that her expression was one of perfect joy and peace. Word reached Robert Lincoln in Washington, D.C., where he was serving as Secretary of War. He had barely spoken to his mother since her sanity hearings. They had attempted to reconcile, but their relationship never fully recovered. The viewing took place in the same room where Mary and Abraham were married 40 years earlier. From there, the funeral was conducted at the First Presbyterian Church. All government offices and businesses in Springfield were closed by order of the mayor. A procession followed her coffin to Oak Ridge Cemetery, where it was placed in the Lincoln tomb. It wasn't until death that she got the respect she deserved in life. At last, the venomous tongues of her critics fell silent, and the prying curiosity of an unfeeling public was no more. Now, in the embrace of those who went before, she would never again suffer betrayal, insult, or loss.
So that's the back part of the tomb, and there's a little, like I call it a church window, but it's one of those where you can't really see through. It's like got a little design to it, pattern to it. But if you were able to look through there, you would. This is the area where he is. That headstone is, and it's probably 6 to 8 feet off of this window. And of course, he's buried way down here. But yeah, I think that's why they put that seat there, so people wouldn't walk up, and try to like peek through. It's just so you can sit down, and of course you're also looking out the back, so there's trees there and stuff. It's nice.
Mary was separated from her much-beloved husband for 17 years, 3 months, and 1 day. When she was sealed in her coffin, the plain gold wedding band he gave her was still on her finger. On it was inscribed the words, "Love is eternal."
Okay, we're going to go ahead and end it here, and we'll be back with part 3, which will finish the whole thing up. I'm enjoying the video. I don't know if you are, but you're watching, so hopefully you are. All right. Oh, you know what? I was going to point it out, but I didn't. I forgot. This isn't the... Here you go. The house. Okay. My apologies. I should have pointed this out before. The house originally, when Lincoln bought it, was 1 story. Okay? Was 1 story. He went off on the circuit doing his lawyer stuff. He was gone for a while. When he was gone, she was saying she wanted a bigger house. And he's like, oh, he called her mother. Oh, mother, we're fine. So when he left, she had the 2nd story put on because she came from kind of a wealthy family. So she had the entire 2nd story added on and everything without even telling him. So he came home in his neighborhood and he was walking up and down the street. And somebody from his neighborhood, by the way, they kept the neighborhood pretty much all the same. All the houses are the same. Somebody said, what are you doing, Abe? And he's like, well, I know my house was here, but this doesn't look like my house. And the person kind of laughed. So he then walked in and she was like, yeah, I know you wouldn't have approved. So I just went ahead and did it. Just found I wanted to pause for that moment, but I think I was probably eating a chip and then I just forgot. Anyways, we're going to end it here. Until next time, have a good day. Have a good night.